All good. Hey, let me get started. As I said, as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from England. I'm an Australian. I've got a British passport. My father was English, but because I've lived in England long enough, the English don't let you call yourself English unless everyone was born and bred there. So I'm British. And so I've lived there for, some of you who know anything about England just got everything I just said. So I've lived there for 16 years now, and it's just been exciting to see what God has been doing over the years that we've been there, and we meet right in the middle of central London, in the middle of all of the chaos and excitement, and so it's great city to live in, great place to visit. If you've never visited London, then why not? Good place to come. Okay, so let me just read this to you, and then we'll in John chapter 20, verse 30 is where I'm going to start, and I like this. I like the way they put the little subheadings in the Bible translations. And the subheading says the purpose of this book. Now, if maybe you're new here tonight, somebody brought you along and you think purpose of this book. I'm not talking about the whole book. I'm talking about this, what in the Gospels called the Gospel of John. And it's almost like John wrote, obviously the translators put the purpose of this book. And it says in verse 30, it says, the disciples saw Jesus do many other miraculous signs in addition to the ones recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you have life by the power of his name. So just hold that verse for a moment. Let me just give a little bit of a picture of myself. At the moment, I shouldn't say at the moment, I'm married to one wife. Have no intention of any more, so that's why I shouldn't have said at the moment. I've got a wife, I've got two children, grown-up children now. One is in Bible college, in our Bible college in Sydney, Australia. Another one has just moved to the United States to do university and play football. That's the football that you use foot to ball and kick for the Americans. So he's gone there to play football and to study. So we're now empty nesters. For the last 10 months, we've had no children and still not coping. That's all I can say. But anyway, so my background is I got saved when I became a Christian in my mid-20s is when I had an encounter with Jesus. I made a decision that this is it. I am following him at the age of 27. Now, at that point, my career path was, my background is I'm an equestrian horse trainer. That was my profession before I went into the ministry. And equestrian horse trainer, meaning I used to ride and train dressage horses. Now, if you're wondering, dressage horses, it's an Olympic sport. I had the ambition, my goal was, I want to go to the Olympics. And if you're going to go to the Olympics, you obviously have the ambition to win a gold medal. I never got to the Olympics, I never won a gold medal, but anyway, I had an ambition. If you're wondering anything about dressage, what is it? It's the sport at the Olympics that rates just below synchronized swimming in popularity, right? So anyway, I was into it, right? So that was my thing. So as I developed, as I got older, and I went from somebody who rode to somebody who would teach people to ride horses. I went from teaching people to ride to training horses for people. Then I went from teaching people how to train horses for themselves, and then I sort of specialized a little bit when it came to just teaching. And so where I ended up was, a lot of the time what would happen is I'd find myself in a place where people would bring their horse to me and they'd come for what we call a riding lesson or a training session. And a lot of the time what you had was people would come to you and they would say, I've got this problem with my horse. The horse is not performing how it should perform. And they, if I can put it like this, so they want to describe their problem. And their problem is they've got this big problem going on in their life with their horse, I should say. And so what you do is when you've been doing things for some time, you tend to develop an eye. So I developed an eye, and it usually could take around about 3 seconds to work out what was wrong. Like, for example, if you go to someone's property and the dog is out of control, it's a good indication that the horse will be out of control as well. So it's not the horse's problem, it's the owner of the dog and the horse, right? So sometimes there are some things that are just giveaways about what's happening. And so because people used to pay me a good amount of money, I learned that you didn't say within 3 seconds what the problem is. Right? You don't do that because you realize that what they do is they go, this guy's about to rip me off. So I thought, well, what you do is you give them around about 15 minutes so that they can show you and ride and go, look at this, look at this, look at this. Can I tell you about this? And you stand there and you ooh and you ah at the appropriate moments, nod, and then you call them over because now they think they're getting their money's worth. And this is what I discovered pretty much all of the time, is that what happens is we've got this big problem here. Well, it seems like a big problem, especially to the rider and to the horse and them trying to compete. And what I discovered was if they let me, all right, you would dig deep into what is happening with the horse's training. You would dig deep into their understanding about what it means to train a horse, how to train a horse. And you just keep digging deeper down into what is going on with the horse. And where you would find yourself, if you dug deeper, all right, you would find yourself at fundamental basics when it comes to the horse's development and training. And you'd find yourself, as you dug deep enough, right down into the issues, that somewhere in their fundamental philosophy, what they understood was not right. You'd find somewhere in their fundamental training pattern that they had neglected to build something into the training of the horse. You would find somewhere that there had been a lack of diligence and follow through on simple fundamental things. And what happened and what you'd notice is if they would allow you, you would deal with some of the basics and focus on fundamental things where there'd been neglect. And without even working on the problem would just disappear. Now, I've been a pastor now for nearly 30 years. People often say to me, what is easier, training horses or working with people? The answer's obvious. All right? Horses are much easier than people. So I'm basically a pastor, all right? I don't think I'm a great Bible teacher. I don't think I'm a great preacher, all of those sorts of things. I'm just a pastor, all right? That's what I do. Work with people, try and help people. And I've learned as a pastor, pretty much people are a bit like horses. People will talk about, I got this problem. Here's my problem. Can I tell you about my problem? Look at my problem. And we want to look at everyone's problem from every possible angle. And so I've learned as a pastor what you do when someone comes and talks to you, you don't tell them in the first 3 seconds what the answer is. You learn how to appropriately, ooh, really? Oh. And you just give enough time, and then if they allow you, you dig deep and you get into the deep things, and as you keep pushing down through the deep things, you find yourself at fundamental things. Things that have been neglected, things that have never been applied, philosophies, thinkings that have never been addressed and that have allowed them over time to end up with this. And so I'm saying all of that to say, if you feel like by the time I finish my message, all you did was come to Sunday school today, well, that's what it's about. Yep. I've now ruined communion. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Right, so let's come back to this, right? So John writes this, and he says, the disciples saw Jesus do many other miraculous signs in addition to the ones recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe. Now, obviously, he goes on and believe in what? That Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you will have life by the power of his name. So the belief in who Jesus is, he's the Messiah, he was the Son of God, and by believing in him, we're going to have power by his name. There's the fruit of our belief. Now, what is interesting is he says that you might continue to believe. Continue to believe. So I look at that and I think if you can continue to believe, perhaps you can discontinue to believe. You can stop believing. And as a pastor, I've found myself fascinated over time how you can meet people who are so into Jesus, so into who he was and what he was about and why did he come and what comes our way because of our belief in him. And they can be so passionate about that, and 6 months down the track, it's like, I don't believe in that anymore. Have seen people over the course of their lives, if they're not careful, have such a conviction about what they believe, and over the course of their lives just find themselves just disappearing and walking away. And probably many of us could name people, or we've got people in our minds that we say, I know so-and-so. So I look at that and think, if you can continue to believe, you can discontinue to believe. When he's talking about believing, I think he's just saying that we're prepared to trust our spiritual condition to Jesus. The who he was, the what he was about, etc., etc. Now, he says here, Jesus did many other miraculous signs. Now, if you flick over your Bible one page, verse 25, it says here that Jesus did many other things, and if they were all written down, I suppose that the whole world could not contain the books that were written. Now, I look at that and I think this. So, now, I was reading one scholar, and I'm here in Jerusalem, so I'm probably in a room that's full of scholars. So if my scholar doesn't agree with your scholar, then let them fight it out. This works for my message, all right? All right? So, and I'm not a scholar, so don't blame me for telling you what I read, all right? So now, it's interesting John wrote this down. Now, this scholar that I was reading, he said that in this time, it was estimated that the estimation was there was something like 600,000 books in existence in this time in what we'd call the known world in this context. So I sit there and I think 600,000 books. 600,000 books that would not be enough room to contain everything that Jesus did. Not just what he did, but then you've got all the things he said. See, he said, obviously we know he said way more than what is recorded. So by the time you take everything that he said, everything that he did, all the books in the world would not be able to contain it. So prolific was Jesus in that short period of time that we call his time, his ministry, or however you might refer to it. Now, my mind is the sort of mind that says, so why did John choose these 7 things? Because he listed out 7 miracles, 7 things that Jesus did, of what he could have picked a multitude of things. If there was so much that Jesus could have done, he picked these 7 things. So obviously my head, as I said, is one of these sorts of people who goes, so why did he write these ones down? I want to find out. I want to look at these things. What's the implication upon my own life? What's the implication upon other people's lives? Because he wrote them down, and that we might believe. And one of the things that I've discovered, and I don't know whether most people, I think, if you haven't heard of him, I don't know where you've been. Heard of Joseph Prince, heard Joseph speak. Joseph will often say this. He'll say, right believing produces right living. And it's interesting how if we're not careful, if we have a propensity towards religion, we think that right living is the thing that is most important. And if we can just get the right living right, it's going to fix up things. No, well, it's actually more about right believing produces right living. And if you think of it from this perspective, if you really want to look at what do I believe, the best way to find that out is have a look at the actions of your life. Observe the actions of your life, and you will begin to observe what you believe. I'm not talking about what you mentally can think about or your ethereal you. I'm talking about what you believe in here. If you want to know what you really believe about things, you will see it in the behaviors of the actions of your life. And it's amazing. So when we talk about it here with John, he says that you might continue to believe. And, sometimes, when we face personal crisis, it brings up, what do I really believe about this? When suddenly there is lack in our lives, what will come out of when we start to think about lack in our life and how we see it, it will really show what we believe. When we make mistakes, in other words, when we have personal failure and how we respond and how we react to that personal failure in our life is often an indication of what we actually believe about the message of Jesus Christ, Him being the Messiah, Him being the Son of God, and that we might have life by the power of His name. We will see it revealed. When we find ourselves in a place where we feel like, if I'm potentially going to get disgraced about this in my life if it was to be revealed. What do we actually believe? And I've noticed over time as a pastor, I've noticed that sometimes when some of these things play out in people's lives, suddenly it's like, oh, I don't know. It's everything from I don't know if I'm worthy of this anymore. I don't know if I can overcome this. I don't know if I don't even know if the whole thing's real because look at this that's happening in my life. And so often things can happen that can cause us to question what we believe. And when we actually put question marks or we start to wonder about what we believe, we can find ourselves just cast by the wayside of our journey. You with me? All right? So just hold that thought for a moment and let me just a slight digress, all right? So as I said to you, I became a Christian in my mid to late 20s. And I say mid to late because in my mid-20s I had an encounter with Jesus, and I had an encounter with Christians, and I just thought, man, they're all crazy. Then it took 2 years for me to go, this is it. All right? And as I said, and I was a horse trainer, but I realized the older I get, the crazier I was in my 20s. I realize now I was mad. I was an idiot, crazy, stupid. And so be careful if you're in your 20s and you think you're smart. You'll grow up. Yeah. So, all right, it'll happen. It'll happen. And so, because I was into training horses, I was actually into training animals. I love training animals. So I wanted to learn how to train lions. Right? So I thought, I want to train lions. I know you did too. I realize that. Right? So I wanted to train lions. And so I had a friend who owned a lion park. I know you have got a friend who owned a lion park as well. But I had a friend who owned a lion park, and I got a chance to play with lions. And I decided, maybe I don't want to train lions. Right? So, but I still thought, but what I want to do is I want to train elephants. I just want to train elephants. So I actually nearly signed my life away to join a circus. And I know some of you had a childhood dream of joining a circus. I did as well. So I nearly joined a circus because I wanted to train elephants. And so I nearly signed, I'm going to train for the circus. I'm training the horses, the lions, and the elephants. That's what I nearly signed up, nearly joined the circus. And told you I was mad. But Luckily I didn't, but this is something I learnt in the process. Have you ever seen an elephant that's in captivity? And often at a circus you'll see an elephant, and that elephant will he'll be tied up outside the circus. Well, that's the old school before the animal liberationists won, but anyway, you'd have elephants, and you'd see this great big elephant standing here like this outside the circus. And because I've got that sort of mind, and I go, look at that great big elephant. And that great big elephant has got this chain around its leg. And to me, it's a big chain, but this big elephant, it's a little chain. And so this elephant's got this chain around his leg. And this chain is locked down, tied to a stake in the ground, all right? And I would sit there and I used to watch the elephant. I think, he's just rocking away. This big elephant, this little chain, this little stake. And I'd think to myself, why doesn't this great big elephant just one day, as he's rocking away, just keeps rocking and then just goes and walk off? He's a big elephant. And so I asked the elephant trainer, why doesn't he do that? And so the elephant trainer said to me, most likely when this elephant was a baby elephant, he was caught and he had this great big chain put around his leg. And that great big chain was attached to this stake that's been rammed into the ground. And this little baby elephant, when he's tied up with this great big chain, would like this, fighting the chain, fighting the peg, and then one day he'd just give up and he'd start doing this. Because knowing that he can't get away, he's trapped. Over time, the elephant grows. As the elephant grows, he becomes way bigger. And the bigger he gets, the smaller the chain. And the smaller the chain, the smaller the stake, till one day, this elephant is a great big elephant with a tiny little chain in comparison and a tiny little stake, but he never ever thinks to himself, why don't I just pull it out and walk off? Because his mind is trapped according to what he believes about the chain, what he believes about the stake, what he believes about himself. See, that's how our minds work. We can find ourselves either free because of what we actually embrace in what we believe, or we can find ourselves trapped and constrained by things that we believe. So there's good and there's bad thinking. You with me? So good thinking can release us into power by the life of, life by the power of His name. Bad thinking, wrong belief, can hold us back and hold us trapped for anything that God can do in our life or wants to do through our life. So good thinking. So there's a power to good thinking. For example, just transformational things, the way we think about things. Old things can hold us back. The things that we presume about things, the things that we believe about things because we either heard it once and that was enough for it, we took it on, that can hold us back from what God can do. Let me give you an example. One of the things that I often do is I go to India, and I go to India, and pretty much I just like to talk about Jesus. I like to tell people about Jesus, give people the opportunity to encounter Jesus at a personal level. So what I'd do is I would go there and we'd just preach about Him, just talk about Him. And at the end of talking about Him, I would just say, who's sick here? Who wants to be healed? And in my times in going to India, I've seen people. I've seen deaf people hear for the first time. I've seen mute people speak for the first time. I can remember once there was this young girl at one of our nights that she was deaf, she was mute. Prayed for her, just a simple prayer, and put a microphone to her mouth, whispered in her ear, Yesu Provovo, which in her language is Jesus Christ is Lord. And the first words she ever heard come into her ears, the first words that ever came out of her mouth was Yesu Probivore. I've seen little kids whose limbs have been twisted with polio before my eyes. It's the craziest thing you ever see. Just straighten up as if polio never existed. I've seen people who are bent over, just could not move, just suddenly straighten up the power of Jesus as he worked in life. I've seen people who completely crippled, bound to the ground, stand up to their feet and walk off. Seen people with leprosy completely set free and healed of leprosy. And so when it comes to belief and a conviction, you can't dissuade me that Jesus is not real. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much you argue with me. You cannot dissuade me he's not real, and you can't dissuade me that he does not have the power to heal the sick, and you cannot dissuade me from that he will heal the sick, because I've just seen him heal way too many people. But then this is what I've noticed. As a pastor, I could tell stories like that, and you would say sometimes, you'd say to people, and you'd talk about it, and people would ask me this question: why don't we see these miracles in the Western world? And this is usually my answer, all right? And this is my answer. Because in the Western world, most of the time you're talking to Christians. In India, I don't talk to Christians, I talk to Hindus. You tell them about Jesus, and they believe. You tell them Jesus is going to heal them, and they believe. Then you tell them, hey, do you want to give your life to Jesus? Well, why wouldn't you? Yeah? And often what happens is in a Western context, and those people come forward and you pray for people. And I've prayed for people, and one of these things that bothers me, and you pray for them, and I can think of people and they start weeping as you pray for them. I say, why are you crying? And this is what they usually say: I don't know why Jesus doesn't heal me. Somebody told me that it must be because I've got secret sin in my life. And I've got to find out what that secret sin in my life is, so that Jesus will heal me when I get rid of the sin. And this is what I say, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way. Well, I say, well, if you don't know what the secret sin is, I'm not sure anybody does, so maybe that's not the issue. The issue is you think what Jesus does that comes your way is based on works. But what Jesus does in our life and what Jesus brings to our life has got nothing to do with our works. It's all got to do with his works, and it's our belief and faith in his works that brings us into what he does in our lives. And so wrong thinking can hold us back. Right thinking can propel us. Compel us forward. Right thinking can build a conviction in our lives that we're completely not dissuaded. A little bit like, why did I use the example of when talking about healing? Because you cannot convince me Jesus doesn't heal. You cannot convince me that he gives people sickness to teach them things. You cannot convince me of that, right? I've got a conviction. When you believe the right things, it's like Peter in Acts chapter 4. Before all the people he was once fearful of, after the cripple being healed, the same people that he was probably fearful of in why he denied Jesus, by the time we get to Acts chapter 4, he's had such an encounter. He's actually got such a conviction. He knows what he believes about Jesus. And when he gets told to quieten and keep his mouth shut and not talk about why this crippled was healed, he says to the rulers and the people of power that he was once scared of, well, you can decide for yourself whether I talk about it or not. But essentially he says, I'm going to keep talking about it. When you've got a conviction because you believe the right things, it doesn't matter what lack there is in your life. It doesn't matter what failure there is in your life. It doesn't matter what's gone wrong. It doesn't matter what disgrace you think could be coming your way. You know what you believe, and you're going to stay on track, and you're going to continue to believe that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it. Amen? Right? So there's lots of things that we can question on what do we believe about things. So, what do we the right things? So what do we believe about the grace of God? Do we believe that it's unmerited favor, or do we believe it's conditional? I'm amazed at how many people believe in the grace of God, providing you actually behave a certain way. Well, it's called condition. If grace can be earned by behavior, it's not grace. Oversimplification, but don't make it much more complex than that. Otherwise, you're going to believe that all God's grace and favor that comes your way is all based on your behavior, which nullifies why did Jesus die on a cross? Right? But you believe that, and you believe that, hey, you know what? That my life is a life that I decide to live to honor Him, not a life that actually has to behave a certain way to please Him so that I'll see Him work in my life. Changes the way we walk, changes the way we handle trouble, changes the way we handle personal failure, changes the way we recover from mistakes that come our way, changes the way we face tragedy. What we believe. Do we believe that He's good? I told you this is Sunday school, all right? I've just been a pastor too long. Psalm 119, verse 68, it says that God, He is good and He does good. Do we believe that? Do we believe He is good and He does good? Well, yeah, I believe He's good and He does good, but gosh, I've read the Old Testament. He did some pretty horrible things. So I wonder if He's going to do them to me. And suddenly, if we're not careful, if we don't allow He is good and He does good to be the thing that rules our picture of Him, it affects a whole lot of other things. Because, for example, just example in Romans chapter 2, verse 4, what's it say? His goodness leads us to repentance. So if it's His goodness that leads us to repentance, it actually brings us into a place where we're actually not fearful of Him and scared to be in personal relationship with Him. But see, if I haven't got the right perspective of who He is, and I believe the wrong thing about who He is, and I don't believe He is good and He does good, probably what I might call my repentance is based on, I better not do this because He's going to get me. So now I'm going to stop doing this, and I'm going to stop doing this, and I'm going to stop doing this, and I'm going to stop doing this, I'm going to stop doing this, because if I don't stop doing this, He's going to get me. But if it's His goodness that leads me to repentance, then suddenly I realize that, you know what, I've got to stop doing this. Yeah, I've got to turn away from this. But we've got to remember, it's a change of mind, not just a change of behavior. And so it's not just change my mind about what I'm doing here. I've learned I can stop doing a whole lot of things. And you know what? It maybe affects the quality of my life, but it does not necessarily affect what's going on at a personal level of my life with Jesus. And I've learned that it's not just what I turn from things. It's about, yes, I've got to turn, but it's more about what I'm turning to. See, if I'm turning to Him, and I'm saying, I'm going to trust You with the spiritual condition of my life. I'm going to believe that You are the Messiah, You are the Son of God, and I can have life by the power of Your name, that Your finished work does apply to me, and I can come into a personal relationship with You that has a transformational impact on my life. That's a lot. It's going to make more difference than just turning from something. Yeah, it's turning, but it's about what I'm turning to. And if we think so, it's not just a change of direction; it's a change of connection that actually brings the transformation in my life. Do you get what I'm trying to? All I'm trying to do is just say how we see things, and being careful of our perspective on things can affect a whole lot of things. Because if we're turning to Him in a fearful way, then our whole relationship is based on the wrong thing. Rather than turning to Him for the right reasons, because it's His goodness that leads me to Him, has an impact, has an effect on my life. Do you get, right? So anyway, I said all that just so we get how our belief system can have an impact on our lives. And so anyway, I told you we're going to talk about 7 miracles in 2 minutes. So let me go through. So here's 7 things that Jesus did, right? He turned water into wine. All right, John wrote these things that we might believe, right? Or continue to believe. He healed the Roman official's son. He healed the paralyzed man on the Sabbath. He fed thousands of people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He records he walked on water. By the time we get to chapter 9, it says that a person born blind was healed. Get to chapter 11, and we find Lazarus has been raised from the dead. Now, so if we take all of those things, all right? Take all of those things and just a simple little statement that I read. We see what's Jesus revealing here? What is he showing? He shows his supernatural mastery, him being Jesus, his supernatural mastery over the created, the material world, over nature, disease, death. It shows his power to create, restore, and make new what has been broken and what has been destroyed. His compassion is revealed, his loving kindness is revealed, his mercy is revealed, his grace is revealed. Every one of these signs not only reveal who he is, but they also demonstrate his power to heal the sick, restore, and give life. Interesting that Jesus said, he says, at least if you do not believe the things I've said, at least believe the things that I've done. So it's in the things that he did is revealing who he is. And it's when we've got the right perspective of who he is and what he's about and the significance of him, that affects what's going on in our lives. Right? So let's just look, if we were to super summarize it, which is not always popular, all right? Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we find that in the beginning, God, what did he do? God created. All right? Interesting, John starts off with, in the beginning. So John, I started at the end of John, but John starts off, declares this is who Jesus is. Jesus is the one who created everything through him and for him, and he goes on. Talks about the fact that he is the God incarnate. If you want to have a look at what does God look like, you've got to look at Jesus. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. He's the visible image, the invisible God. What does Jesus look like? What does God look like? You have to look at Jesus because Jesus was God. That's what John states there at right there at the beginning. So if you take Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, in the beginning he created. By the time we get to Genesis chapter 3, we've got humanity has got a problem. All right? Pretty much in Genesis chapter 3, everything that's wrong in the world is rooted there in Genesis chapter 3. Everything that's wrong with the world, big picture, everything that's wrong with my world, small picture, is rooted in Genesis chapter 3. The rest of the Bible is pretty much, I know I'm oversimplifying it for being in Jerusalem, but anyway, the rest of the Bible is pretty much God decided to fix it through being the person of Jesus. Bang, there we are. The whole Genesis 3 problem is fixed in Jesus. How do we fix the world? Tell them about Jesus. How do I fix me? Give my life to Jesus. Oversimplification, if we try and make it too much more complex than that, we just might miss what he's trying to do. Do you get what I'm trying to say? If we just keep it just from that, there it all fixed. Let's go to the first miracle, right? So in the first miracle, think about, in the first miracle, in John chapter 2. So it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him they have no more wine. Dear woman, that's not our problem. It's not how you talk to your mother. He says, not my time yet has not come. Then you're like this. But his mother told the servants, do whatever he tells you. Typical mother, completely ignored everything he said. All right, completely ignored him. Everyone who's got a mother said, yeah, that's how mothers do it, yeah. So then it goes on, and we know, most of us know what happens. He takes the ceremonial jars of water, takes the water in them, turns them into wine. And turns out it's the best wine, not the cheap wine. Get to the end of this part here, and last part of verse 11 says, and as his disciples believed in him. All right. Now, according to this scholar that I was reading, now if your scholar doesn't line up with my scholar, it's okay, all right? We'll let them fight about it. right? This works for my message. According to what I read, running out of wine was not a cool thing to do at a wedding. In fact, running out of wine probably had the potential of bringing social disgrace upon the household because they ran out of wine. And so it's almost like Jesus, he steps into this situation. Now, firstly, let's just go big picture. What does he reveal? Turns water into wine. Hey, I'm the God in Genesis 1. There it is. Who else can take one substance, turn it into another one, unless you be God? So immediately, Jesus, I am God. That's what he reveals, because that's what God can do, and I can do that. He's revealing who he is, right? Now, if you look at this whole story as you go through it, you take what Jesus did. So what did he do? He supplied. There was lack. He supplies the lack. He reversed the failure. Whoever was responsible for the wedding, whether it be the bridegroom or the other side, either way, I don't know enough about tradition to know whose problem it was. It was someone's. But what does he do? There's a failure. He reverses the failure. All right? He reversed the social disgrace. If there was a social disgrace is meaning I'm going to lose favor. There's going to be a loss of favor here in the eyes of the community. What is a basic condition in our humanity without Jesus? A loss of the favor of God at work in our lives. What's part of the basic problem of our lives is the lack in our lives, the failure of our lives. The interesting thing that he also did, which I think is fantastic, is he actually covered up the mistake. He said to the servants, which, and I guess to his mum as well, and to the disciples that were there, I don't want you to tell anybody what has happened here. Now, there's a bigger picture reason, because it wasn't time for him to reveal who he was. However, if you just bring it down to just on a personal level, there was no like, hey, I just want you to know, I'm Jesus. I was at the wedding, and here I am at the wedding, and they run out of wine. And here's the dude that was he's the one that caused the mistake here. He's the one that he could have been disgraced. But hey, I'm Jesus. Selfie, and I've fixed the whole thing and exposed. Because there's something in our human nature that just is the opposite of the way Jesus behaves here. Our human nature, if we're not careful, there's something about our human nature that loves to highlight lack in people's lives, loves to point out failure, loves to expose mistakes, and loves to see social disgrace or favor withdrawn from people. But Jesus is the complete opposite. He's the complete opposite. And so if we now personalize it, just coming to an end, all right? I don't know you any better than you know me, okay? But just ask this question. Is there lack in your life tonight? What's lacking? Something you lack. You lack. Because often lack can cause us to question, is God really for me? Isn't he for me? And what failure is potentially going down? You might be right in the middle of a colossal failure, and you might be absolutely fearful that if people found out about this, that you're just going to be disgraced. But Jesus, the amazing thing about Jesus, what did he do about the guy's potential disgrace? He made him look good. He brings out best wine last. He made the guy who made a mistake look good. That's the power of our testimony in knowing Jesus. He takes a broken life. He takes lives that are messed up. He takes lives that are full of all sorts of mistakes and failures. And he weaves himself into our lives, and he creates testimonies that when people look at us, they say, what is it about your life? Why is it that your life? How come this about your life? And we say, if you only knew what was going on in my life, but look at what's going on, because this is Jesus at work in our lives. I believe that he wants to if there's things where you sit there and you go, you know what, I need Jesus in my life. And you might be sitting there and it might be what you think about, perhaps potentially what you believe. It might be sickness in your life. It might be lack. It might be failure. You might be on this little treadmill that we all so easily get on, like that crazy little rat on a treadmill, just running and going nowhere, trying to, if I keep doing, I'm going to get good from God. I can't do good to get good, but we get, because of the mistakes, because of our failure, we get there. And we think, yeah, but what can he do about that? Can he do anything about it? Well, I think he can, because see, the first miracle, what did he say? This is what I say about your problems, about what's perhaps lacking in your life or what you're believing to see him do or whatever. He could turn water into wine. So what can he do in your life? He turned water into wine, revealing he's the God that said, let there be, and there was. He spoke the world into existence. He breathed life into man. And sometimes if we're not careful, because we're just not believing in a God that is big enough, and we restrict him to some of the things where our belief perhaps is withholding us from the bigness and the awesomeness and the love and the grace and the mercy of God, that he can, if he can speak the world into existence, I'm pretty sure he can address the lack in your life. The moment we say, my mistake is too great, we're saying his cross is not good enough. So let's think about when we look at the things that can come down on us, and think about how they can affect how we see him, because how we see him will determine what we believe, and what we believe determines what we see of him at work in our lives. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I know, just real simple. But so all I want to do is I just want to pray for you that this Jesus that we talk about, of the many different angles and the many different perspectives and all of those sorts of things that we can talk about him. He is God. Not was, he is. And he can. It's completely within his capacity to deal with the things that can weigh us down and plague us in life. And I just want to pray. I want to pray for you, and I pray that you're not going to be wondering whether God's for you. You're not going to be wondering whether he can, whether he wants to. Address, maybe you're thinking, maybe you're like that little elephant that just grew into a big elephant that just thinks this thing is never going to go. I can never get away from this. This is never going to change. Come on, we're talking about God here. That's who we're talking about. We're not talking about a religious belief. We're talking about a God that wants to bring us into a relationship with him, that wants to work in every facet of our lives. That's the God that I believe in. That's the God that you believe in. Can I pray for you? And then however we finish up, but if we just take a moment and I want to pray, and let's just worship, and let's let the Holy Spirit just work in your life tonight.